1845, the Arctic. Two of the most advanced ships ever built, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, sail into the frozen waters of the Northwest Passage. On board, 129 of Britain's finest officers and sailors, the best equipment money could buy. Steam engines, years of preserved food, even a library of over 1,000 books and fine china. They were never seen alive again. For nearly 170 years, the fate of the Franklin expedition remained one of the greatest mysteries in exploration history. What happened to these men? Why did they abandon their ships? And what horrors did they face in the endless Arctic ice? This is not a story of triumph. This is a story of hubris, suffering, and one of the most complete disappearances in naval history. You're listening to Archive Vault Podcast, where we open the sealed files and examine the lost expeditions they never wanted you to forget. I'm your host, Joshua. Tonight, we investigate the Franklin expedition. Welcome to the Vault. Everything you're about to hear is based on historical records, recovered artifacts, official search reports, and the wrecks discovered in modern times. No speculation, just the files and the ice. Now, let's go back to the summer of 1845, when the British Empire launched what it believed would be its greatest Arctic triumph. By the mid-19th century, Britain ruled the waves. The Royal Navy was the most powerful force on Earth, and finding the Northwest Passage, a navigable sea route through the Arctic from the Atlantic to the Pacific, had become a national obsession. Whoever found it would bring an enormous prestige and commercial advantage to the British Empire. Enter Sir John Franklin. At 59 years old, Franklin was already a legendary Arctic explorer. He had mapped large sections of the Canadian coastline on previous expeditions. Though some questioned whether he was too old for another harsh journey, the Admiralty trusted him. He was experienced, respected, and determined. On May 19, 1845, the two ships HMS Erebus and HMS Terror set sail from Greenhithe, England. They were the most advanced vessels ever sent into the Arctic. Both ships had been heavily reinforced with iron plating for ice breaking. They were fitted with brand new steam engines and screw propellers. They carried 3 years' worth of food, including over 8,000 tins of preserved meat and vegetables. They even had a library of 1,200 books, a hand organ, fine silver cutlery, and mahogany furniture for the officers. The crew of 129 men included experienced Arctic sailors, officers, engineers, and even an ice master. They were confident. Many believed they would sail through the passage and emerge in the Pacific within a single season. On July 26, 1845, the expedition was last seen by a whaling ship in Baffin Bay. Franklin's men were in high spirits. They sent letters home and continued west into the unknown. After that, silence. No word, no distress signals, no survivors. For years, the British public and the Admiralty waited. Then they began to worry. Then they panicked. Dozens of search expeditions were launched, some by sea, some by land. Rewards were offered. Inuit communities were questioned. But for decades, almost nothing was found. The greatest naval power in the world had sent 129 men into the ice, and they had simply vanished. After their last sighting in Baffin Bay in July 1845, the Erebus and Terror sailed westward into the Arctic archipelago. They made good progress at first, but by September they were already fighting thickening ice. The expedition spent its first winter on Beechey Island, off the southwest coast of Devon Island. 3 crew members died there and were buried with headstones, the only confirmed graves from the early part of the journey. In the summer of 1846, the ships broke free and continued south, trying to find a passage west of King William Island. Then disaster struck. In September 1846, the ice closed in around them near the northwest coast of King William Island. This time it didn't let go. The two ships became locked in pack ice for the entire winter, and then another. The men were not overly worried at first. They had enough food, fuel, and shelter. But the Arctic winter is merciless. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees Celsius and lower. The sun disappeared for months. On June 11, 1847, Sir John Franklin died. He was 61 years old. Command passed to Captain Francis Crozier of the Terror, an experienced Arctic officer. By the spring of 1848, the situation had become desperate. A note later discovered in a stone cairn tells the story. Dated April 25, 1848, it reads, HMS Terror and Erebus were deserted on the 22nd of April, 5 leagues north and northwest of this, having been beset since the 12th of September, 1846. The officers and crews, consisting of 105 souls, under the command of Captain FIR M. Crozier, landed here in latitude 69 degrees, 37 minutes, 42 seconds north, longitude 98 degrees, 41 minutes west. Sir John Franklin died on the 11th of June, 1847. The note continued with a chilling update. By that point, 24 men were already dead. The survivors, 105 men, abandoned the ships and began a desperate overland march south toward the Back River on the Canadian mainland. They dragged heavy lifeboats mounted on sledges filled with supplies, scientific instruments, clothing, silver cutlery, and even books. They were heading for a place they believed had help and game to hunt. They never made it. What followed was one of the most harrowing retreats in exploration history. The men marched across a frozen wasteland in failing health. Their canned food was slowly poisoning them with lead. Scurvy was setting in. The ice was unpredictable. Inuit oral histories later recorded encounters with gaunt, starving white men dragging boats across the snow, some already showing signs of cannibalism. The once proud Franklin expedition had been reduced to a broken column of dying men walking into oblivion. Back in Britain, years passed with no word from the expedition. By 1848, the Admiralty grew alarmed and began launching search parties. Over the next decade, more than 30 rescue expeditions, both naval and overland, scoured the Arctic. But it was not the Navy that brought the first real answers. In 1854, Scottish explorer John Ray, traveling overland, met Inuit hunters near the Pelly Bay area. The Inuit told him they had seen dozens of white men dragging boats across the ice a few years earlier, starving, desperate, and dying. Some of the stories included disturbing details. The men had resorted to cannibalism. Ray bought silver spoons, forks, and other artifacts from the Inuit that clearly belonged to Franklin's officers. When he brought this news back to England, it caused a national scandal. Lady Jane Franklin and much of the British public refused to believe the cannibalism reports. In 1859, Captain Francis Leopold McClintock led another search. On King William Island, his team discovered the famous Victory Point Note, the only written record left by the expedition. It confirmed Franklin's death in 1847 and the abandonment of the ships in April 1848. A ship's boat mounted on a sledge containing 2 skeletons and an astonishing collection of useless items: silver spoons, books, toothbrushes, and other comforts. The men had been hauling luxury goods while literally starving to death. Over the following decades, searchers and later archaeologists discovered scattered graves, bones, and artifacts along the route. Skeletal remains showed clear signs of scurvy, starvation, and lead poisoning, likely from the poorly soldered tin cans that were supposed to feed them for years. Most shocking were the cut marks on many bones. Clean, deliberate cuts, consistent with butchering for food. Modern forensic analysis has confirmed what the Inuit had reported over 150 years earlier. In their final desperate months, some of Franklin's men had turned to cannibalism. For over 160 years, the ships themselves remained missing. Then, in a remarkable validation of Inuit oral history, in 2014, the wreck of HMS Erebus was discovered. In 2016, HMS Terror was found nearby. Both ships were exactly where Inuit elders had said they would be. The wrecks are remarkably well preserved, still containing countless artifacts that continue to reveal new details about the men's final days. The Franklin expedition did not simply fail. It completely collapsed in one of the most total disasters in exploration history. All 129 men perished. Not a single soul survived to tell the full story. Modern science has finally pieced together what went wrong. The tin cans that were meant to sustain the crew for years were poorly soldered with lead. The men were slowly poisoning themselves with every meal. Scurvy weakened them further. The extreme cold, lack of fresh food, and relentless ice took care of the rest. The ships themselves were trapped far longer than anyone expected. The summer of 1846 to 1847 was unusually cold, and the ice never fully melted. What was supposed to be a route of glory became a frozen prison. For Britain, the loss was a national trauma. It shattered the myth of British invincibility in the Arctic. Lady Jane Franklin spent years and a fortune searching for her husband and became a national heroine. Monuments were built. Songs were written. The tragedy captured the public imagination like few events before it. Then, in the 21st century, the story found new life. In 2014, a Canadian search team, guided heavily by Inuit oral history, discovered the wreck of HMS Erebus. 2 years later, in 2016, HMS Terror was found just a few miles away. The ships are in astonishing condition, sitting upright on the seabed, protected by the frigid waters. They continue to yield artifacts and clues that rewrite parts of the story even today. The wrecks confirmed what the Inuit had been saying for generations. The men had indeed abandoned the ships and tried to walk south. The Franklin expedition stands as a powerful warning about the limits of technology and human arrogance in the face of nature. Even the most advanced ships and best prepared crew of their time were no match for the Arctic. The story of the Franklin expedition is more than a tale of tragedy. It is a story about hubris, endurance, and the unforgiving power of the natural world. 129 men left England full of confidence and imperial pride. They carried the finest equipment Britain could perceive. They believed they were going to conquer the Northwest Passage. Instead, the ice conquered them. Today, the wrecks of Erebus and Terror lie quietly in the Arctic waters, silent monuments to one of history's greatest vanished expeditions. Thanks to Inuit knowledge, forensic science, and modern archaeology, we now know far more about their final months than anyone could have imagined even 20 years ago. Yet some mysteries remain. We may never know exactly what the last survivors thought or felt in their final days. The Franklin expedition reminds us that even the strongest empires and the most determined explorers can be swallowed whole by the wilderness. Thanks for listening to this episode of Archive Vault Podcast. The wrecks of Erebus and Terror are protected historic sites. Many of the artifacts recovered can be seen in Canadian museums. If you enjoy stories of lost expeditions, frozen mysteries, and human endurance, subscribe and join us next time as we open another file from the vault. I'm your host, Joshua. Until then, stay warm and respect the ice. Thank you for listening to Archive Vault Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive and found it insightful. Wishing you a great week ahead, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. We'll be back soon with more stories from the archives. See you next time.